Hello and welcome to the 18th century presentation. I am Axel and I'm here with Lova, Noa and Sanna. So first we're going to talk about the three main periods which together make the 18th century. We have the Enlightenment, the Augustan period and the Age of Sensibility. But first, Lova is going to talk about difficulties in delineating the period.
Well, it's always hard to delineate a period since they usually overlap. The stylistic features of literature don't change overnight, and that's why it's hard to delineate it.
Thank you. And now we'll go to the Enlightenment.
The Enlightenment took place during the 18th century, which definitely affected the literature of the time. During this time, natural science broke through and the church's power started to decrease. The authors started to criticize society and debated around this topic in their literature. One of the biggest authors of the time was the Irishman Jonathan Swift. And through his famous novel, Gulliver's Travels, it can easily be concluded that he lived during this time era. Since it criticizes the contemporary social conditions, and he also brought forward the tough England. At the time, it was not acceptable to criticize society out loud, so the criticism was usually brought forward as a metaphor hidden between the lines of literature or as a satire.
Okay, moving on to the Augustan period. The time frame is usually said to be around 1700 to 1745, which was the death of the prominent writer Jonathan Swift. But again, there are some difficulties delineating the period, so it should be taken with a pinch of salt. The Augustan period is usually said to be the age of satire, with witty and sarcastic writers criticizing parts of society, being very clever with the English language and rhyming in poetry. In this age, the church was weakened from the Enlightenment and from the scientific view of society, leaving writers with more space to criticize parts and social standards of society. Also, the Augustan writers usually got their information or inspiration from ancient Roman and Greek literature. They were obsessed with pieces such as the Iliad and the Odyssey, and usually took inspiration in their own writing, creating new genres such as the mock heroic, which is based on the epic and being interpreted in their own way. Also, in this era, the printing press was first created, leaving writers with a way to replicate the writing and give it to the population of the country to see their satirical criticisms of society. This was also the age where the novel started becoming prominent as well.
The Age of Sensibility spanned the later half of the 18th century. It is sometimes also called the Age of Johnson, because of Samuel Johnson, a famous author at the time. The history of Tom Jones, A Foundling, by Henry Fielding, is considered to be one of the first English novels. The Age of Sensibility is often also called the Age of Transition, because it later transitioned into the Romantic Age. The Age of Sensibility is in a sense a precursor to the Romantic Age, and it incorporates themes of it, such as emphasis on emotion, imagination, and nature, but it still had some themes from the Augustan period, such as an emphasis on science and the clinical truth. And during this time period, a new kind of poetry in a more romantic style was common.
Some writers and works from the 18th century is on this slide, and it starts with satire, with Jonathan Swift and Alexander Pope being the most prominent writers. Their works were from Gulliver's Travels and Apollo's Proposal, which were satirical views of society, being extremely famous even today, with Apollo's Proposal proposing that we should eat poor children, and A Rape of the Lock from Alexander Pope, poking fun at small things in society, which we will be taking a closer look at the next slide. Some novels from the 18th century is Robinson Crusoe from Daniel Defoe, with a lot of focus on the human mind and reasoning when Robinson Crusoe gets stuck on an island. And also there are more dramatic and romantic novels, such as Pride and Prejudice. A dictionary of the English language was also written at this time period from Samuel Johnson, which was one big point of literature history and was very important.
And our prescribed literature was a poem by Alexander Pope, and it's called The Rape of the Lock. It rhymes in a very nice way, but the fact that it's a mock-heroic satire makes it more interesting. And mock-heroic means that you take something and over-dramatize it by a lot. For example, The Rape of the Lock is about something very trivial, a day in the life of an upper-class woman and a lord cutting a lock from her. And it does not sound very exciting, but when you read it, it seems like she's a goddess with angel-like creatures flying around her. And the fight that follows after the lord cut the lock from her hair sounds like it could come straight out of the Iliad. Alexander Pope basically over-dramatizes the events taking place. But what did he want to get out of this? First, he wanted to poke fun at the upper class. It's not anti-society, which some satires are, but just a little mean. And secondly, he wanted to say that society is too much about appearance, it's too superficial. He meant that you should focus more on what a person thinks. And Pope himself wasn't very good looking. He had some kind of back deformation and he was very short. And that could be an explanation to the choice of message he wanted to convey. And this can be connected with today's society. We are on Instagram and Facebook every day, and we see nice photos from people who want to brag about their life and their looks. And let's face it, we all want to get as many likes as possible. We focus too much on everyone's outside appearance and too little on what's beneath. And this superficialism has always been a problem in modern society.